for all of us. Kia ora, thank you.
Mahesh Bindra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to speak on the Electronic Monitoring of Offenders legislation bill. Mr. Speaker, the intent of this bill is to make provisions for the courts to stipulate electronic monitoring for those offenders who have been judged as being under intensive supervision conditions, and those offenders who have served or are likely to serve less than 2 years of imprisonment. This is in addition to the offenders on home detention, community detention, extended supervision, parole, and release to work schemes, or those who were bailed with specific conditions, Mr. Speaker. Now, this provision will also cover the offenders involved in family violence who pose a very high and serious risk to their victims. This provision may apply to any prisoner serving 2 years or less and who, in the opinion of the Department of Corrections, requires electronic surveillance to prohibit them from entering or remaining in specified places or areas at specified times or at all times, which earlier used to be known as the whereabouts condition, Mr. Speaker. This, in our view, will only contribute towards enhancing public safety as long as it is an additional condition and not the only condition for such a release. At the moment, Mr. Speaker, as Honorable Goff mentioned, there are about 40-odd offenders who are at large, who have violated their condition and who have breached the electronic monitoring system. So with this coming into force, and I quote one of the submissions that Mr. Kim Workman who represented on behalf of Robson Hannon Trust, and I quote him, "The bill would expand monitoring to an additional 5,800 prisoners serving less than 2 years in jail without proper consideration of what that would entail." He further says, "Electronic monitoring allowed people to be released without a proper reintegration strategy and support will affect over time in the jurisdiction using it as slack off in rehabilitation and reintegration strategies as they came to rely on electronic monitoring." So this would result in over-reliance on a system which has failed 15,500 times in the past, Mr. Speaker, since 2008. So, and also the funding is the other thing that we are worried about. There is nothing in the budget to provide for the 5,800 extra offenders who will be covered under this new legislation. On the contrary, 3.4 million have been reduced in the heading called sentences and orders served in the community. This category is limited to the management and delivery of sentences and orders served in the community and electronic monitoring of people on bail. So we fail to understand as to how the agencies or the contractors or the departments that are responsible for monitoring these offenders on electronic system, how will they cope with 5,800 more offenders with 3.4 million less money? So that's the risk we see in this. The system has already failed. It is proved to be a failure, and still we are over-relying on this system. Then we claim that the communities will be safer relying on this system. So we think that this is a disaster waiting to happen, as has happened in the case of Blessy Gotinko. Tony Robertson was on electronic bail, and not on electronic bail, he was on conditions for next 10 years. And within 5 months of his release, he reoffended. And the result was that an innocent victim was killed and raped. So this system has again proven to be a failure. We want electronic monitoring extended to those offenders currently serving a custodial sentence and have to leave the secure confines of a prison for any reason. This will enhance public safety in a scenario where prisoner escapes custody during an outing but is not able to cut or remove or otherwise tamper with the electronic monitoring device. Public safety, Mr. Speaker, relies more on surveillance than just on electronic monitoring. It has proven to be effective in some instances. However, at no stage has this system been foolproof. Even the minister has admitted that even after these changes, this is not going to be a foolproof system. So why are we relying overly on a system which has failed 15,500 times? The other thing that comes to our mind, Mr. Speaker, is the one instance where it can actually work is the outing that has been declined to some Maori offenders in the past for two reasons. One, that they are high security prisoners, and the other thing is that they cannot be handcuffed on MRI. So we think that corrections can actually think about this as an option. And this is an operational matter for corrections. This is my suggestion that if they look at it, they can actually make the system work to send those offenders on a tangi with only the electronic bracelet. Because if the offenders can be sent to the community without handcuffs and with just electronic monitoring, then the offenders can be actually sent on MRI with just the electronic bracelet with two officers, as is the practice now. But that is something that the corrections will have to see as a matter of operation. So on the other hand, this legislation may be helpful in providing some relief to the Maori prisoners. But other than that, we do not believe that this system is going to make any changes in the safety of the communities at present. 5,800 more offenders being monitored under this system, which is proven to be a failure, is not going to be supported by us. We do not support this bill. Thank you.